The internet has introduced us to countless unforgettable monsters over the years. Some first appeared in blockbuster movies. Others became famous through video games. But every once in a while, an entirely original idea appears online and somehow grows into a worldwide phenomenon. Few characters represent that better than SCP-173. At first glance, it doesn't seem particularly impressive. It looks like a strange concrete statue with a rough, almost handmade appearance. Bright splashes of paint cover its face, giving it an unsettling but oddly memorable look. It doesn't carry weapons. It doesn't roar. It doesn't even appear to move until nobody is looking. That single idea helped turn SCP-173 into one of the most recognizable internet creatures ever created. Nearly 2 decades later, people are still making videos, writing stories, creating games, and debating theories about it. But here's what's really fascinating. The biggest mystery isn't just the creature itself. It's how a short piece of online fiction managed to convince so many people that it felt strangely believable. To understand why, we have to go back to where it all began. Back in 2007, the internet looked very different from what we know today. Social media was still finding its footing, and online forums were some of the most creative places on the web. People gathered there to share artwork, ideas, short stories, and all kinds of imaginative projects. Among those communities, someone using the online name Moto42 posted something unusual. It wasn't written like a horror story. It wasn't written like a novel. Instead, it looked like an official government document. The writing was brief, clinical, almost emotionless. Rather than trying to scare readers with dramatic descriptions, it simply explained procedures as if the reader had stumbled across a classified file that was never meant to be seen. At the top of the document was a simple designation, SCP-173. There was no lengthy backstory, no explanation of where it came from, no dramatic introduction. Instead, the document focused on something much stranger: how the object should be contained, how personnel should interact with it, and what could happen if those procedures failed. Oddly enough, leaving so many questions unanswered made the story even more believable. Readers weren't told exactly what SCP-173 was. Was it alive? Was it some kind of supernatural entity? An unexplained anomaly? Or something completely beyond human understanding? The document never said. And that's exactly what captured people's imagination. Instead of giving readers every answer, it invited them to fill in the blanks themselves. As it turns out, mystery can be far more memorable than certainty. That original document became the foundation of something much bigger. Soon, other writers began creating similar reports using the same format. Each one described a different mysterious object, creature, or phenomenon. Every entry had its own number, its own containment procedures, its own strange rules. Little by little, those independent stories grew into a massive collaborative fictional universe, now known as the SCP Foundation. Today, that universe contains thousands of entries written by contributors from around the world and translated into dozens of languages. Yet, despite its incredible size, one name almost always serves as the starting point for newcomers: SCP-173. Not because it's the strongest, not because it's the most dangerous, and not because its story is the longest. It's because its central idea is brilliantly simple. The statue doesn't move. As long as someone is looking directly at it, that's it. One sentence, one rule, and somehow that rule has remained unforgettable for years. But here's where things become even more interesting. The moment people hear that rule, their minds immediately start asking questions. What happens if 2 people blink at the same time? What if the lights suddenly go out? What if a security camera is recording the room? Would that count? And what if you're completely alone? Questions like these have fueled endless conversations across forums, videos, and fan communities, not because people believe SCP-173 is real, but because the concept feels surprisingly easy to imagine. After all, blinking is something every single one of us does without thinking. You can try to keep your eyes open. You can delay it for a few seconds, but eventually, you're going to blink. That simple human limitation became the foundation of one of the internet's most iconic fictional creatures. Remarkably, SCP-173 doesn't rely on an elaborate design or an overly complicated backstory. Its power comes from an idea anyone can understand within seconds. And perhaps that's why it has remained relevant for so long. Not because people believe the creature exists, but because they can't help imagining what that situation would feel like if it did. Of course, that was only the beginning. As the years passed, SCP-173 spread far beyond a single online post. Fans created artwork. Independent developers built video games around its unique mechanics. Animators brought it to life. Content creators produced documentaries and theory videos. With every new interpretation, the mystery only grew larger. And before long, one question started appearing again and again. What exactly makes SCP-173 so dangerous? Why are the containment procedures so incredibly strict? And could there be a logical explanation behind the single rule that made this fictional creature famous? Around the world, that's exactly where our story goes next. As the SCP universe continued to grow, so did the stories surrounding SCP-173. Interestingly, the original document itself never became much longer. Instead, thousands of writers began expanding the world around it, imagining how researchers, security personnel, and entire facilities might deal with something that followed such an unusual rule. In many of those stories, SCP-173 is kept inside a specially designed containment chamber. On the surface, the room doesn't seem particularly remarkable, but every procedure inside it is carefully planned. Whenever maintenance crews or researchers need to enter, they never go in alone. Several people enter together. They constantly communicate with one another. And before anyone blinks, they count out loud. 3, 2, 1, blink. It sounds simple, almost routine. But that's exactly what makes the scenario so memorable. Imagine standing in a quiet room with what appears to be nothing more than a motionless statue. Everything feels completely normal for a few seconds. Then someone loses focus. Someone blinks a little too early. Or perhaps the timing isn't perfectly synchronized. Suddenly, the ordinary becomes unpredictable. That's one of the reasons SCP-173 has remained so compelling. It doesn't rely on constant action or dramatic chase scenes. Instead, it builds tension through a single, easy-to-understand rule. A room, a statue, a few people trying not to blink at the wrong moment. Sometimes that's all it takes to capture the imagination. As SCP-173 became more popular, fans began bringing the concept to life in new ways. Independent game developers created experiences where players explored abandoned research facilities while following the same containment procedures described in the fictional documents. Rather than defeating monsters with powerful weapons, players succeeded by paying attention, watching, timing their movements, managing something as ordinary as a blink. That simple mechanic turned into one of the most recognizable ideas in indie horror gaming. What's remarkable is that many people remember the gameplay long after they've forgotten the story itself. The rule became the experience, and that experience made SCP-173 unforgettable. Before long, videos of people reacting to the game spread across YouTube. Artists imagined different versions of the creature. Animators experimented with how it might move. Meanwhile, discussion forums, filled with theories attempting to answer questions the original story never intended to explain. In many ways, SCP-173 stopped being just a fictional object. It became one of the internet's earliest examples of collaborative storytelling on a massive scale. What makes SCP-173 so memorable isn't that it's the scariest creature ever imagined, and it certainly isn't the most complicated. Its lasting impact comes from a single idea that's almost impossible to forget, a statue that never moves. As long as someone is watching, it's an incredibly simple concept. Yet it inspired countless games, animations, short films, fan theories, and creative projects across the internet. Nearly 2 decades after it first appeared online, people are still discovering SCP-173 for the very first time, and longtime fans are still finding new ways to interpret its story. Maybe that's the true legacy of SCP-173. Not that it convinced people it was real, but that it proved a great idea doesn't need pages of explanation to capture millions of imaginations. Now, we'd love to hear what you think. What made SCP-173 such an unforgettable internet icon? Was it the famous "don't blink" concept, its unique presentation, or the way the SCP Foundation blurred the line between fiction and official documentation? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to read your theories. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed exploring the story behind one of the internet's most iconic fictional creatures, be sure to join us for the next mystery.